Today's shir is, should women do Kiddush Levana? Okay? Should women do Kiddush Levana? So let's take a look at our papers. Side number one, it's one paper with two sides. Side number one. First of all, why do we bless the moon? Does the moon need our blessing? And should women bless the moon and do Kiddush Levana? What's the purpose of Kiddush Levana? Kiddush Levana is one of the 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. We'll see in a minute. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. It's Berchat Shevach V'Haidaya. So let's take a look at source number 1 on side number 1. What's it all about? Why should we bless the moon? Source number 1 on side number 1. Amar Rab Abba Acha Bar Chanina Amar Rab Asiyam Yochanan Kala Mavorech Al Chodesh Bismano. Source number 1 on side 1. Anyone that does Kiddush Levana on time, we'll find out when that is. Ki'ilu Makabel Pnei Shchina. You hear this? It's like you're receiving God's presence. And why should that be? Why should it be? Why should it be that doing Kiddush Levana, what are we actually doing it for receiving God's presence? Because we see God through nature. How do we see God? Through Teva. In fact, the word HaTeva in Hebrew has the gematria Chava of Elohim. So we see God through Teva. Elohim is gematria Teva. So, the closest heavenly body that we have, that we can see most visible of all the stars is what? The cycle of the moon. So the waxing and the waning of the moon, that demonstrates God's power, God's dominion over the stars. So therefore, when we bless the moon, we're actually blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the waxing and the waning of the moon is a symbol of what? Of the Jewish people's rebirth. We rejuvenate, get it? Rejuvenate ourselves. So the waxing and the waning of the moon, the Zohar said, therefore we follow a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar, because the moon's waxing and the waning, that represents the Jewish people. It looks like we're about to disappear. And we are, Nikki, the great comeback kid. We keep rejuvenating ourselves, renewing ourselves, and that is a symbol of what? Of the Levana, and therefore we follow a lunar calendar instead of a solar calendar. How is it possible that just 3 years after the Holocaust, a third of our people were destroyed? We rise like the phoenix out of the ashes of Auschwitz, come back and build this beautiful country just 3 years after the Holocaust. How could that be? That's the power of what? Of Kiddush, of Chodesh, that we are able to rejuvenate ourselves, and that's symbolized by what? By the moon. So when we bless the moon, what are we actually doing? We're blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He gave us the ability, like the moon, Yehuda, to rejuvenate ourselves. Even though it looks like it's going to be totally swallowed up in blackness, we're the great comeback kid. So, should women do Kiddush Levana? So if you look at source number 1, side 1, source number 1, we have underlined there, Omalei Hai Noshi Didan Nami Mivarche. You hear? I have it underlined. On source number 1, the first word in the line is Lei Hai Noshi Didan Nami Mivarche. So according to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, women should also what? Do Kiddush Levana. You hear this? So the question is, do we do it or not? So anyway, what is the context? What do we say? Baruch b'mamorei boresh chokim. God creates the heavens. The first word on the line in source number 1, Mickey, is the word heavens. You see that? Source number 1, heavens. Briach piv kol tzavam. Chol kazman nosan lahem. Flo yishanu es tafkidam. Sosim esmeichem lasot etzayin kainam. They are happy to do the will of their Creator, the heavenly bodies. Po'ala emes shepalosan emes. Lavon omer shetischades shateres. Teferes lamuse boten. What does that mean, lamuse boten? For those carried by Him from the womb. It's a pasuk in Isaiah 46. that just as a woman carries her child in her womb, God carries us. So the moon is the symbol that despite all of the tzarot, all of the blackness and the suffering and the darkness, God continues to carry us as what? As a mother carries her what? Fetus in her womb. La musei boten. Baruch ato Hashem mechadesh chadashim. So when do you do Birchat Levana? We say Kiddush Levana. What do the Sfardim say? Birchat Levana. When do we do it, Rav Yaakov? Source number 2. Slide number 1, source number 2. Vein mevarchen ela yereach b'motzei Shabbat. When do you do the blessing of the moon, Yehuda? Saturday night. Before you go to the movies, you bless the moon. Why? Keshu mevusam v'kelim noyim. When you're dressed nice and you're all perfumed up, that's the time to what? To bless the moon, because when you're blessing the moon, you're actually blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The moon is just what? His what? His shliach. So we see God's greatness through what? The heavenly bodies. And the closest heavenly body to the earth is what? Blue moon. Blue moon. No, because you can't see them with the naked eye. Right, Dillian? The closest heavenly body we see without a telescope, the waxing and the waning, is the moon. So we see God's greatness through his heavenly bodies. And the moon is the closest, so therefore, we're not blessing the moon. We're not pagans, God forbid. We're blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right?
A
lot of people don't want to do it. He wouldn't do it. So this is the point. We're not blessing the moon. We're not moon worshipers.
He said it was pagan.
No, that's the whole point. We are praising God. But how do we praise God? Through his handiwork. And the closest heavenly body that we can see is what? So if you think you're blessing the moon, that's a big mistake. You're blessing the one who created the moon. You're praising him. So if you look at source number 2, we're supposed to do it Motzei Shabbat, when we're oiskeputz. How do you say oiskeputz? Because when you are blessing the moon, what are you doing? Ilu mekabel pnei hashchina. Gemara in Sanhedrin 42, you're receiving God's presence, because we only see God through his handiwork, yes?
I know this might sound like a question.
Yeah.
Don't you think there are other religions that are monotheistic?
Yeah.
Also, they could say we are blessing God or praising God through his shlichim, and they bow down to idols that they could say, it's not the idol, I'm not stupid, I know the idol
Right.
can do this, that, and the other.
Right.
But the idol is God's physical representation on earth.
The Rambam says that's why it's called Avodat Kachavim. Why is Avodah Zarah called Avodas Kachavim? Because the ancients, they made that mistake. They realized that God created the heavenly bodies, and a king would appreciate if you pay homage to his minister. So since the God created the heavenly bodies, by worshiping the heavenly bodies, the king would appreciate it. Like the king appreciates if you worship his ministers. But that's classic Avodah Zarah. That's my whole point. You're not worshiping the moon, chas v'shalom. You're worshiping God, but we worship God by acknowledging his handiwork. But God forbid to think that we are moon worshipers. No, that's the wrong religion. We are worshiping God, we are praising God by acknowledging his wonder, and we see that most clearly, Connie, by the waxing and the waning of the moon without a telescope. So for 1 minute, don't think you're worshiping the moon. That's paganism. That's Avodat Kachavim. We are worshiping God by acknowledging his handiwork, but not worshiping the handiwork. That's classic Avodah Zarah, yes?
That's the reason, I think, why once we, once we've sighted the moon, we turn our backs to it.
Beautiful, doctor, beautiful. We'll get to that. We turn our backs to it that we're not worshiping the moon. And more than that, we'll see soon. But for source number 2, why do you do it Motzei Shabbat? Because when you're receiving God's presence, you should be dressed nice. So why don't you do it on Shabbat? Why don't you do Kiddush Lavon on Shabbat? The answer is Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha, Avram. Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha. On Shabbat, we are praising God for the Shabbat. Kiddush Lavana, we're praising God for what? Blue moon. So we don't want to mix one simcha with the other. So therefore we don't do Kiddush Lavana on Friday night or Yontiv night, because Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha, we do it on Motzei Shabbat. Okay? Praising God when we're oiskeputz. How do you say oiskeputz? Right.
Since this is a blessing, it must be rabbinic, not the rice.
Well, of course, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. It's one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs.
It is not 7.
There's one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs of Yaakov is to make brachas. Look at source number 3. Source number 3. You with me or against me? Yeah, source number 3. The Rambam Hilchas Brachot. Haroa keshet ba'anan. If you see what? A rainbow. You're supposed to make a bracha. Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Zoicha bris v'ne'ema b'brisai. If you see a rainbow, you're supposed to make a bracha. God remembers the covenant with Noach. Next line, Haroe Levana. Anyone who sees what? The moon in its renewal should make the bracha. Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. The blessing that we make. Baruch Ato Hashem mechadesh chadoshim. So the Rambam compares Berchat Lavana or Kiddush Lavana to what? Blessing a rainbow. Do women make a bracha on the rainbow? Of course. So according to the Rambam, and Ras Soloveitchik points this out, source number 3, just like the Rambam says that women make a bracha on a rainbow or on Niagara Falls or on the Swiss Alps, making a bracha on the Lavana is Berchat Shevach V'Haidaya. One of the 7 rabbinic mitzvot is to make brachos, praising God. So when you praise God for Niagara Falls, or a shooting star, Abraham, or for the rainbow, Kiddush Lavana, you're also praising God. So just like women praise God on Niagara Falls, or a shooting star, according to the Rambam and Rav Soloveitchik, women should also make what? Berchat Lavana, because it's just like what? Berchat what? A keshet. Or on Niagara Falls. It's Berchat Shevach V'Haidaya. It's one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs is to bless God for his wonderful what? Universe. So according to the Rambam and Ras Soloveitchik, women should also what? Do Kiddush Lavana. But we're not finished yet. We'll see. According to Kabbalah, they shouldn't do it. So don't mix me up. According to Halacha, in source number 3, women should do Kiddush Lavana, but we'll move on. We'll see that that's not the end of the story.
Everything with women, of course, is time-bound mitzvahs they're not subject to. This seems to be...
The making a bracha on a rainbow, is that a time-bound mitzvah?
No.
So the Rambam compares making a bracha on a rainbow to what? Kiddush Lavana. According to the Rambam, they're not time-bound mitzvah, and therefore ladies should what? Also make Kiddush Lavana, Berchat Lavana. Why we don't do it, stay tuned. Okay? Okay, so you're supposed to make the source number 3, 2nd paragraph. This is the Rambam. You have it, Mekimia? The Tzorach Lavarach Bracha Zu Mumad. Kiddush Lavana you're supposed to do standing up. Shekol Amvarach Al Chodesh Bizmano, says Rambam, source number 3, 2nd paragraph. What's the next word, Yehuda? Ki'ilu. If you do Kiddush Lavana, it's like receiving God's presence. You hear that? And you're supposed to make the bracha until Shisha Asa Yom B'Chodesh. You can only make this bracha up until what? The 16th day of the month. And then it's too late. Okay? The 16th day of the month.
This is an oral tradition that tells you this?
That what?
Because they wrote the bracha.
The rabbis say you can only make the bracha up until the 16th day of the month. Then it's too late. You missed the boat, then you have to wait until next month.
It starts diminishing.
That's right, because then it starts diminishing after the 16th of the month. Then it's too late. Okay.
You want a full moon to make a bracha.
Right. Let's go to source number.
Which you think you want to make it on the full moon day. You want to make it on the
No.
15th.
Let's go to source number 6. Shulchan Aruch. You have that? Ein mevarchen el yirech motzei Shabbat. You only make the bracha on Saturday night when you are oiskeputzt ubegodev noyim. And what? Wearing nice clothes. Because when you're receiving God's presence, you should be what? Dressed properly. And you don't do it on Friday night because ein marvin simcha b'simcha. Shabbos, we're busy praising God for the wonderful Shabbat, so we didn't want to interfere to praise God for the moon, so therefore we postponed it until when? Motzei Shabbat. At Motzei Shabbat. What?
It can't be the first.
No, it has to, yeah, let's see, right?
It can't be like the second or third.
Right.
It has to be like
So, yeah.
a week or something.
Now he says here, look at source number 6, Hagah. See source number 6, the middle of the line, Hagah. V'dafkim leil motzei Shabbat kodem yud b'chodesh. That's if Saturday night comes out before what? The 10th day of the month. Then you wait until motzei Shabbat. Avlum hu achakach. But if it's after the 10th of the month, you don't wait until motzei Shabbat. Because maybe there'll be cloudy nights. He says there'll be cloudy nights and you'll miss the mitzvah at all. So the best time to do it is what? Shabbos night. But if you can't do it Shabbos night, do it during the weeknight. And he says when you do it during the weeknight, you should put on your best suit. Did you know that? When you do it b'chol, yesh lilbosh begodim noyim, says the Ramah. You hear that? So if you do it during the weeknight, you should put on nice clothes because again, when you're doing Kiddush Lavana, you are receiving Kiddush Baruch Hu's presence. Because we acknowledge God, we see God through Rabbi Yaakov, his handiwork. Okay?
I can see the moon in the daytime. Why
No.
can't they do the bracha?
The rabbis say only what? At night. If you turn the side over, side number 2. Side number 2. Let's go to the line which says Nahagin Lomar, 4 lines down from the top. You have that, Avram? Side number 2, V'Nahagin Lomar. What's the next word, Yehuda? 4 lines down from the top. David, Melech Yisrael, Chai, Chai, Vekayam. David, Melech Yisrael, Chai, Vekayam. Why in the middle of Kiddush Lavana do you sing David, Melech Yisrael? Why? So what does he say, Yehuda? Shemalchutai nimshal alvana. Because King David's kingship is compared to what? The moon. V'atid letchadesh. Just like the moon waxes and wanes. So King David's malchus now, it's what? Waning. Now it's waning. But there'll come a time where it'll wax again with the coming of the Messiah. So, in the middle of Kiddush Lavana, we sing David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, even though now it looks like he's waning. Hang in there, don't despair, hang in there. Just like the moon renews itself, King David's kingship, the Melech HaMashiach will also what? Rejuvenate itself. And therefore you say that in the middle of what? Kiddush Lavana. Okay, V'Knesses Yisrael Tarzor is by the Gabala. And the nation of Israel will once again cling to her husband. Who's her husband, Abraham? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shu HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Dugmat halvana. M'schadeshes imachama. And therefore we rejoice. Therefore we rejoice. Simchas Nesuin. Why do you dance after Kiddush Lavana, Mekimia? Why do you dance? Why are you happy? Because we are renewing our lovey-dovey relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like a dance at a chasana. Simchas Nesuin. You hear that? Every time when you dance at Kiddush Lavana, it's like a Simchas Nesuin. You are renewing your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like God is the husband, Kaviyachol, and we are the Kala. But in the middle of Kiddush Lavana, you say Shalom Aleichem.
You greet your fellow Jew.
Why? Why in the middle of Shalom Aleichem you say, in the middle of Kiddush Lavana, you say Shalom Aleichem? What's it got to do with the price of tea of China?
That's the best part. You can say hello to everybody.
But why in the middle of Kiddush Lavana? Why? Fasten your seatbelts, Rabbi Yaakov. We learned in Sanhedrin 42 that anyone who does Kiddush Lavana, ki'ilu mekabel pnei ashchina. What does that mean? Close but no cigar. You're not really receiving God's presence. It's ki'ilu. Says the Maral Miprag, but when you turn to a fellow Yid with a shmeichel, you say Shalom Aleichem, it's mikabel pnei ashchina. You hear? Because every Jew has a tzelem Elohim. Every Jew has a chelik Elohim Yimal. And therefore, when you greet a single Jew, you say Shalom Aleichem. Chava, why don't you say Shalom Aleichem? Why even when you greet a single Jew, you say Salam Aleichem? Why in the plural? Because, says the Maral, because when you greet a single Jew, you're greeting him and his Tzelem Elohim and his Chelik Elohim Yimal. Did you know that? So 3 times is a chazaka. So says the Maral, when you're doing Kiddush Lavana, it's ki'ilu mekabel pnei ashchina. But when you greet a fellow Jew with a smile, you are mekabel pnei ashchina. You're not playing make-believe. Isn't that amazing? Because every Jew has a tzelem Elohim. Every Jew has a chelik Elohim Yimal. So if we really believe that, how could we be angry and speak Lashon Hara about a fellow Jew? Doesn't make any sense. So in the middle of Kiddush Lavana, we turn to a fellow Yid and we acknowledge that every Jew has part of the Shechina in him. So you say Shalom Aleichem even to a single Jew because you're greeting him and the Shechina inside of him. Now why Dafka 3 times? Look at note number 7. Yehuda, you with me? Note number 7? What does it say there? V'rokei gimel pamim. And you should what? Dance 3 times. 3 times in halach is what? A chazaka. 3 times make his facts on the ground. V'yizaher. That was Tirza. That was your question. See source number 7? Maybe you can take the sheet for Reb Mordechai. Can you take it for him? Please. Because aren't we worshiping the moon? What are we, pagans? Source number 7, Yizaher, Shelo Yichra. Don't bend. Don't bend, Avram. The Mechazek Kareya Lavana, God forbid. Because it looks like you're bowing down to what? The moon. Oh, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. And therefore, says the Mishnah Brura, after you do Kiddush Lavana, you say Oleinu L'Shabeach. Oleinu L'Shabeach Ladon Hakol Loteit Gidula Liyotze Bereshit. Why do you say Oleinu L'Shabeach right after Kiddush Lavana?
Make a point
that I worship only God. I'm not worshiping the moon. I'm not a moon worshiper, Avram. So right after Kiddush Lavana, all of a sudden you sing Oleinu L'Shabeach Ladon Hakol. I only worship the master who created the moon. Don't think I'm a moon worshiper. And therefore, after Kiddush Lavana, we always say Oleinu Otam, that we only worship God alone. And we acknowledge him, we praise him through what? His handiwork. But God forbid not to think that what? That we are worshiping the moon. Chas v'shalom. And we say 3 times, Shalom Alecha, because say 3 times is what? Is a chazakah. So, according to the halacha, in source number 3, Rasaveitching on this Rambam, women should do Kiddush Lavana, just like they do what? A bracha on Niagara Falls. Just like they do a bracha on a rainbow or the shooting star. But how come ladies don't do it? Because according to Kabbalah, you shouldn't do it, ladies.
Yeah, well,
why?
Bathsheba wants to do it.
Okay, she should have been here. You see that? If you go to source number 8, you'll see why in practicality, even though halacha says ladies should do it, Rabbi Yaakov Golden, but when you have halacha and Kabbalah, sometimes we follow Kabbalah against halacha. But why? Source number 8. This is the Shloah HaKadosh, one of the great Kabbalists who lived in Tzfat. one of the great Kabbalists who lived in Svat, the great Kabbalist, the Shloh, right? So he says, source number 8, in Munag Yafa, Mizmor, we say Tilim. Let's go down in the middle of that source number 8. Okay, you say Kaddish Rabbanan. And what else do you say? We say, you see what it says, the world would fry? You see where the source says the world would fry. Rabbi Yaakov, you have that? We say that when Mashiach comes, Ti Or Lavana K'or Chama. We quote a pasuk in Yeshayahu that when Mashiach comes, the light of the moon will be like what? The light of the sun. Isaiah 30. Is that possible? If the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, what would happen? The earth would fry. You'll be French fries. So what are we saying, Abraham? What are we quoting Isaiah 30? That the Mashiach comes, the Or Halvana will be like the Or Chama. So we know, Abraham, that prophets speak in metaphors. So the Radak says that it's a metaphor. It doesn't mean literally that the moon will be as strong as the sun. We don't want to become French fries, Lillian. The Radak explains it's a metaphor. Prophets speak in metaphor. The sun is what? Umat Olam. John Kerry, Barry Suero, Barry Obama, the UN, brash, bold, arrogant, that's the sun. The moon is what? The Jewish people, we are surrounded in blackness. We always take a back seat to the what? The UN and the EU. So what Isaiah means that when Mashiach comes, the Levana, who's the Levana of Yaakov? Am Yisrael. We will be as bold and as what? Radiant as what? As the UN and the EU. But it doesn't mean literally that the moon will be like the sun, because then the world will burn up. So you have to understand that prophets speak in metaphors. The only prophet, doctor, that did not speak in metaphor was Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay? So Or Havana Or Chama is a metaphor that the Jewish people who are downtrodden, surrounded by blackness, it looks we're about to swallow up. When Mashiach comes, we are going to be on par with what? With the brash UN and the EU. V'oz yiskadel v'yiskadesh shemei rabbah. Ve'Hashem shalem, v'akishe shalem. When Mashiach comes, God's name will be complete. Now we can't pronounce God's name. And God's throne will be complete, right? Ashnir be'enai shemitam zeh. Listen to this, Mikimya. Misrakim anoshim mitzvazu. Therefore, women, stay away from this mitzvah. Al pi Kabbalah, women should stay away from which mitzvah? Kiddush Lavana. Kiddush Lavana. You see that? Source number 8. I have it underlined. You have it? Af al pi shemekaimin harbe mitzvot. Even though women do many time-bound mitzvahs, they do it anyway. Kigon shayfa v'lulav. What's the next word? V'loy re'inu. You have it, Yehuda? V'loy re'inu? Ma'olam. You have it, Chava? Source number 8. You see that?
Last line.
V'loy re'inu ma'olam. Source number 8, the last line. It's on the line. We have never seen noshim what? Mekaimot Kiddush Lavana. So, pi Kabbalah, women should stay away from what? It's against the Gemara. The Gemara says clearly that what? Women should do it. The Rambam says women should do it. So how come Kabbalah says that women should what? Stay away from it. Why is that? Mickey, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now what do I mean by that? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What does the Shloah mean over here?
Does this Shloah have an older brother?
The Shloah HaKadosh.
No, I had an older brother.
No.
Old Shloah?
No.
Oh.
Rosh Chodesh, Kiddush. Women have a built-in clock where every month they what? They renew themselves. They rejuvenate themselves. And therefore, Rosh Chodesh is the yontif for women. Why is Rosh Chodesh a yontif for women? Women have a minhag not to work on Rosh Chodesh. Why is it their yontif? Why? I'll tell you why. Rosh Chodesh, can you see the moon?
No.
It's totally blacked out. It's totally blacked out. It looks like there's no hope. When the moon is blacked out, when the matzav looks hopeless, like in Mitzrayim the matzav looked hopeless. The men divorced their wives. All they saw was blackness. Why have children? They'll wind up in the bottom of the Nile River. What did little Miriam say? Daddy, your decree is worse than Stalin, right?
You're killing girls,
Right?
girls too.
So, Amram remarried what? Yocheved, and they had baby Moses. So when the chief rabbi remarried his wife, all the other Yidden, the Hasidim, remarried their wives. So Rosh Chodesh is the yontif for women. Because Rosh Chodesh, you can't see the moon. It's all black. Like the matzav in Mitzrayim, the men gave up hope. That's it. The women never gave up hope. So that's their yontif is Rosh Chodesh. When the situation looks black and you can't see no light, that's Rosh Chodesh. So we need to be Kiddush Lavana. We have to reinforce ourselves that even though the situation looks black, there will be light at the end of the tunnel. The women have it built in. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And therefore, the women never sinned with the Egel. What is the connection? They never sinned with the Egel, and therefore they get Rosh Chodesh as a yontif? What's the connection? What's the connection?
Well, at one time, everybody
What? So Pirkei Rebbe says that before the Chet Egel, Rosh Chodesh was supposed to be a full yontif. Just like there's a yontif Yehuda, the Sholosh Regalim are for the 3 patriarchs. So every Rosh Chodesh was supposed to be a yontif in honor of the 12 tribes of Israel. But when the Jewish people sinned with the Egel, God penalized us. Rosh Chodesh is no longer yontif. Since women never sinned with the Egel, therefore, they don't get Rosh Chodesh as a yontif. We lost Rosh Chodesh as a yontif for the Chet Egel. The ladies never sinned with the Egel, so they never lost Rosh Chodesh. For them, it remains a yontif. So plan A was Rosh Chodesh should be a yontif. We sinned with the Egel, God went to plan B. No yontif. But since the ladies never sinned, it's not that they get Rosh Chodesh. For them, it remains a yontif because they never sinned with the Egel. Right? So, anyway, Zrizim Magdi, look at source number 9. So therefore, women, Api Kabbalah, don't do Kiddush Lavana. It's not necessary. We need to do Kiddush Lavana. We have to reassure ourselves that God is always smiling on us, even though we can't see the light. But women, they have this awesome power to see through the darkness. Because ladies were created from the inside. The ladies were not created from the nose or the pinky. Lady was created from what? From the rib, Adam's rib. That's inside, so women can see right through. Even though the situation looks black and you can't see any light, women know that God will never abandon us. They never gave up hope like in Mitzrayim. So they don't need to do Kiddush Lavana. We need to do it.
So the rabbis wrote the bracha, did they say women not to do it? Or?
Well, I told you, look at the Gemara in Brachas says women should do it. See, source number 1. But Api Kabbalah,
Who's big enough to overrule?
well, you have sometimes you have halach and Kabbalah that they clash. So Api Kabbalah, women shouldn't do it, but according to halacha, women should. So Avram, who do you follow? Halacha, Kabbalah. Okay? So you have an option to do it. So that's the answer. According to halacha,
Is it a bracha at all for the woman to do it? No.
according to halacha, women should do it. According to Kabbalah, women shouldn't do it. So you're covered. Whatever you do,
You're okay.
you're covered. Right? I got you covered. Whatever you do, I got you covered. Okay?
Be careful what neighborhood you do it in.
But you can take the source with you. You see source number 1. The Talmud says clearly, Mekimian, source number 1. I have it underlined. Noshin didan nami mivarchi. You see source number 1? I have it underlined. Source number 1. Noshi didan nami mivarchi. You see that? That our women, says the Talmud, in Babylon 2,000 years ago, women were doing what? Kiddush Lavana. And you look in source number 3, the Rambam compares it to what? To rainbow bracha. And Rav Soloveitchik said, based on this Rambam, that according to halacha, ladies should also what? Do Kiddush Lavana. But most of the world follows the Shla, Api Kabbalah, and they don't do it because they say if it's not broken, don't bother to fix it. So whatever you do, Mekimia,
I'm right.
you're covered. Whatever you do, you're what? You're covered. Okay? So he said the moon represents Am Yisrael. According to the Zohar, the moon represents Am Yisrael. We're downtrodden. We are always shrouded in blackness. It looks like we're about to be swallowed up. Disappear, the Holocaust. But the great comeback kid, 3 years after the Holocaust, we built this beautiful state of Israel. It's unbelievable. That's the koyach of renewal, of Kiddush. The men always look at the dark side. Women are eternal optimists, so they don't need the Kiddush Lavana because they know that even though it's black, God's smiling face is always on us. Okay? Now, in Pashas Pinchas, where it mentions Rosh Chodesh, it says, V'sir izim lachatas l'Hashem. On Rosh Chodesh, we have to bring a goat, a sin offering to God. You don't have it on your sheets, I don't think. But if you look in Pashas Pinchas, where it mentions the Korbanot Yehuda for Rosh Chodesh, it says, Sir izim lachatas l'Hashem. It doesn't say that by any other festival. Chatas l'Hashem, what does that mean? A sin offering for God. So the Talmud in Chulin, page 60, asked the question, does God need a sin offering? So the Talmud says, what? Yes. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chulin, page 60. Havi kapar alai. God says, bring a atonement for me that I diminish the Yareach. You hear? Remember the moon was supposed to be the same size as the sun, right? But God diminished the moon. So the Talmud says in Chulin, page 60, that every Rosh Chodesh is actually what? Yom Kippur for God. We get Yom Kippur when? Once a year. But the Talmud in Chulin, page 60, makes a shocking statement that every Rosh Chodesh, Chava, is a Yom Kippur for God.
Is that Yom Kippur Katan?
That's the idea, Yom Kippur Katan. That's the same idea. But that's shocking. If God diminished the moon, why does he ask us to bring a kapara for him? Isn't that his business?
Sorry, he did it.
Huh? Why is he asking us for a kapara? You diminish the moon. What's it got to do with us?
That Israel doesn't have power now. That Israel isn't the ruler of the world.
Yeah.
We would have had more light.
We would have had more light. But the world couldn't exist. If the moon was the same size as the sun, the world would fry.
Yeah.
So what does it mean that God diminished the moon? What does that mean, that God diminished the moon? It's an allegory. Keep in mind that the Talmud consists of two sections, Halacha and Agadah. The Ramban told us, and the Marsha and the Maral, Rabbi Yaakov Goldman, that only the halachic part of the Talmud must be taken literally. The Agadah part of the Talmud, like God made the moon and the sun the same size, and then the moon complained. When was the last time you heard the moon complain?
Sun complained.
It's an allegory.
The man on the moon, he complained.
It's an allegory. Any Agadic statement, Chava, is not to be taken literally.
Right.
People get all mixed up if they take the Agada. Again, Talmud consists, Avram, of two parts, halacha and Agada. Only the halachic part of the Talmud has to be taken literally. This is an Agadic statement. Rav Soloveitchik explains it's an allegory. The sun represents what?
The world.
Barry Obama and John Balkeri and the UN and the EU. The moon represents the state of Israel, right? Always put down, discriminated against, shrouded in blackness. We are the moon. God says to Am Yisrael, why do I have to put you through this agony in this world? Why do you have to be always in the back seat? Why do you have to be surrounded by blackness? There's a plan, but I can't share it with you. So when God says, bring a kapara for me that I diminish the moon, what does God mean? That I diminished you. God Kaviochel asks slicha that I have to put you through a Holocaust, through an Auschwitz, through terrorism. There's a plan, but I can't tell you about it. But I ask Kaviochel every Rosh Chodesh. God asks what? Slicha v'kapara. Avram, it's a mind-boggling. Every Rosh Chodesh, God asks from Am Yisrael, Slicha v'kapara, that there has to be a Holocaust. Why? There has to be terrorism. Why? There's a plan. I can't share it with you, but I ask you kapara, slicha. Isn't that incredible? Gemara in Chulin, page 60, when God asked for a kapara for diminishing the moon, he actually means God, Kavayochel, asked kapara why he has to what? Send us a Holocaust, etc. Yes?
If I recall correctly, every
Don't forget
Korban
Dimatu.
HaMusafim,
Yes. Sirizim. But it never says Chatas Lashem, only by Rosh Chodesh. By no other yontif to say Chatas Lashem. It says Sirizim Chatas. Man Ishtana Rosh Chodesh, where it says Chatas Lashem. So the Gemara says that every Rosh Chodesh Avraham is Taka Yom Kippur, Kavayochel, where God asks us Slicha Mechila, that he has to put us through such anguish as taking such abuse from the abomination and John Balkeri and the EU and the UN. Why does God put us through that? There's a plan, but he can't share it with us. But he asked Kavayochel Kapara, that's Rosh Chodesh, yes?
And don't forget Dimitude, please.
What?
Don't forget Dimitude.
What's dimitude?
That's what they put the Spartim through, and the
What?
Mizrahim.
What's
That
dimitude?
the Arabs did, doing program after program after program.
But what does dimitude mean? Never heard that word.
Oh, Dima is the law of the Muslims. And
To
when
subjugate,
and they subjugate the Jews.
Dimi,
Demihood.
Dimitude, exactly.
That's all part of the blackness of the moon.
Yes, exactly.
Of course.
Exactly, don't forget.
Of course, what?
Attacks.
Whatever. We always suffered from blackness, from the brash, bold sun, the Umat Olam. Yes?
We suffer also because we don't have Jewish pride. I don't know if everyone here gets the Post, but they had this big article how the EU is building houses for the Bedouin in between Mali Adamim so that we won't be able to connect.
Right.
Our government's not doing anything about it because we're afraid of the
Right.
fire.
We need.
Went on the oil tour and I saw them on tour.
Right. Right.
So angry.
But there is a plan.
So we are,
But we have a promise when Mashiach comes, the moon, Avram, will be the size of the sun. It doesn't mean literally the world is not going to burn up. It means we will no longer have to take a back seat and suffer from the sun. We will be the superpower when Mashiach comes. We have that haftacha. And Kiddush Lavana reminds us of that. Not to despair, hang in there. But you ladies, Connie, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So Api Kabbalah, that's why you don't do Kiddush Lavana. We have to stop the cup. We need the reminder, Avram, every Rosh Chodesh, every Kiddush Lavana to remind ourselves that we will be rejuvenated. Ladies are naturally reminded, and therefore they don't need Kiddush Lavana al pi Kabbalah. If they want, they can do it, because the halacha says that what? That they should do it. So whatever you do, Mekimia, you're covered. Got you covered. We are the moon.
As opposed to Michael Jackson.
Barack
We are the
Obama,
world.
Barry Obama, the abomination, that's the sun. So now we have to take his abuse. But there'll come a time when we won't have to take his abuse anymore, when the Levana Am Yisrael will be on the level of the Chama. And by the year 6000, the jig is up. So if you stay healthy, you take your spirulina, by the year 6000, another 200 years to go, we're going to actually see the Levana Am Yisrael, we all shine on. Who sang that, Avram? We all shine on, right? So this is the haftacha that we have,
The sun gets a bracha.
right?
The sun gets a bracha only once every 27 years.
Once in 27 years. Birchat HaChama, once in 28 years.
28 years.
Once in 28, hang in there, another 26 years to go.
We just did it a couple years ago.
We did it about 5 years ago.
5 years.
So hang in there, right?
3 years ago.
Yeah, but the rabbis,
Excuse me, in 1951, I read this. I was only 1 year old. I don't remember, but I read this. I was 1 year old, 1951. It was Birchat HaChama, and it was a very cloudy day. The Klosenburger Rebbe rented a helicopter. In 1951, he rented a helicopter, Avram Berkowitz, and he flew above the clouds, and he made Birchat HaChama. You can read about it in the New York Times, 1951. So the Klosenburger Rebbe, can you imagine to rent a helicopter in 1951? It must have cost him a pretty penny. I hope the Hasidim Kani chipped in, and he was able to fly above the clouds, and he made Birchat HaChama. Once in 28 years, where the sun goes back to the exact position where God put it there, and when he created the universe. Once in 28 years. Welcome back. Thank you very much.